The Jehovah's Witnesses, a religious group that asks believers for their devotion, their loyalty, and to faithfully follow the teachings of the Bible.
Jehovah's Witnesses' beliefs can be used to easily manipulate vulnerable people.
If witnesses ever leave the organisation, they are shunned.
And it sadly has led people to commit suicide.
But now, we've learnt that at least 20 former members who were sexually abused are suing the organisation.
I've never spoken publicly about this before, even to my family.
I was sexually abused from the ages of around 8, and my parents would be in the next room.
I use the word buggered because that is exactly what happened.
Some believe the church has protected the perpetrators.
There are parents that haven't done anything about the abuse of their children by others because they don't want to bring reproach on Jehovah's name.
Their systems allow abusers to flourish.
The Jehovah's Witnesses organisation uses the Bible as the basis for its teachings. Each group meet in what's called a kingdom hall, and that's made up of elders, ministerial servants, and then ordinary members of the congregation. John Viney was an elder in the Jehovah's Witnesses for 55 years. His daughter, Karen, was sexually abused by another elder within the congregation. She reported the abuse and then wanted to leave the group. John disowned her, which he has regretted ever since.
When I was an elder and as a dad, I put being an elder absolutely first. And that was a mistake. I get very emotional about this because I realise that my actions have affected others. I've affected others by disfellowshipping them, not just my family, others. I will have had a terrible detrimental effect on the lives of other people.
I was sexually abused while I was a Jehovah's Witness from the ages of around 8 to around 12. The situation that I was put in was to help this man make tea for everybody after the Bible study. So he would use that opportunity while everybody else was in the next room to touch everywhere that he wasn't supposed to touch. And my parents would be in the next room.
Emma, not her real name, eventually confided in her friend about the abuse. When her dad found out, he called the police. Elders found out about the allegations and arrived at Emma's house to find out more.
So they came round, all quite formal, sat in the living room, had a big long discussion. They go through a lot of scripture about why we should sort of maybe deal with it in-house and we don't need to be following the laws of the land. But they do ask you to go into a lot of detail, where you were touched, to what extent the abuse was, the location, and they ask you to thoroughly explain everything. All I can remember really is them sort of sat looking, just both glaring at me like you need to repeat to us what happened, you need to tell us who it was. They asked for quite gritty details, and I think my dad took over a lot because he didn't want me to have to go through it.
Emma's abuser eventually pleaded guilty and was imprisoned for 2 years, but later returned to the organisation. Julie, also not her real name, was sexually abused by an elder as a child and was forced to stay quiet.
It started from about 8.
And how long did that abuse go on for?
For several years. I think until I kind of got old enough to think, hang on a minute, this isn't right. So it wasn't until probably senior school where I kind of got savvy enough to start giving this guy a bit of a wide berth.
Julie finally reported what happened to her to the police, concerned he may reoffend.
This man that had sexually abused us all as children now had access to his granddaughter, who was sleeping in his house on a weekly basis. The police responded very quickly and put in safeguarding measures. The way I understood it was that he wasn't allowed to be on his own with her whilst the investigation went forward. Anyway, fast forward a year and he went to trial. He was convicted and he was sent to prison.
Now, years later, Emma and Julie are one of at least 20 people suing the church. Thomas Beale is the solicitor representing both women.
A lot of my clients first go to the organisation looking for an apology, and it's their attitude in denying what's happened or refusing to engage that ultimately leads to the clients wanting to bring a civil claim. If the claims are ultimately successful, then the individuals would receive compensation to assist them with trying to get on with their life.
But some believe the abuse is still present in the organisation.
There are Jehovah's Witnesses, active Jehovah's Witnesses, that abuse children. And I know for a fact now that there are parents that haven't done anything about the abuse of their children by others because they don't want to bring reproach on Jehovah's name. They put being a Jehovah's Witness before doing the right thing and reporting child abuse.
Sarah Champion, MP and chair of the Parliamentary Committee looking at adult survivors of sexual abuse, has met with senior leaders from the Jehovah's Witnesses, but is not convinced they are safeguarding children.
I mean, this is child abuse. I'm deafened by the alarm bells that are ringing if that's the safeguarding that's in place. And that's exactly why the Charity Commission needs to be getting involved, because these establishments, these congregations have a duty of care to vulnerable children.
The Charity Commission has been investigating the Jehovah's Witnesses organisation since 2013. A spokeswoman said the inquiry remains ongoing, but would not comment further.
I'd like the organisation to acknowledge, if they won't go so far as to acknowledge the abuse that went on, to acknowledge that their systems allow abusers to flourish, and that they will do everything in their power to protect vulnerable children, vulnerable adults, and stamp out any corner where an abuser could be lurking.
A spokesman for the Jehovah's Witnesses said parents and victims are informed they have the right to report the matter to the authorities. The spokesman said if a congregant has been guilty of child sexual abuse, elders inform parents with minors so that they can take measures to protect their children.
I left about 12 years ago because the situation that was involving my family, my daughter who was sexually abused by an elder.
During the interview, John unexpectedly revealed to me a secret he's been hiding for decades.
I've never spoken publicly about this before. Only recently, even to my family and to my wife and kids. When I was a youngster, between the ages of about 9 and 13, a distant family member who was an active Jehovah's Witness abused me. I use the word buggered because that is exactly what happened.
John finally went to the police over 50 years later to report what happened to him.
And you know how sad I am to have found out that that person went on to abuse other children and went to prison and died in prison as an abuser. Now, what would have happened if I had had the courage and the common sense to have come forward? I didn't, and that's the biggest regret I carry with me.